to smile about. Been broke down, too proud to cry it out. Walk a mile in my boots and you know what I'm about. I took some licks and I took some hits and I found out them bones can actually break sticks. But them words are powerful as shit.
Hello, everyone. This is Travis Johnson, and I am so thrilled to be with you here in Tacoma as we do this podcast. And we're exploring the idea of let the paint dry. And that's really a concept that, and a catchphrase that I have been saying and posting on Facebook as I post paintings. I'm an artist, a poet, a singer, a sound healer, a teacher, speaker, coach. And so I put that all under this idea of being a creative. And what does that mean? That means I express myself in so many different ways. Sometimes it is a song. Sometimes it's a painting. And sometimes it is a speech, sometimes it's a poem, and sometimes it's just being there for people. All that is a part of my work as a creative. And this phrase, let the paint dry, really was birthed with me taking my paintings out of the studio space and onto the back porch of my house and letting them breathe, letting them dry, and just looking at them in a natural light. And it was really metaphorical to everything that I do. This process was really, really important because taking these paintings out and putting them on the back porch in natural light, they changed. They looked different. They had a different feel. And a lot of times I would know by putting them in this different context, I would be able to tell if the painting was done or not. And as I stepped back and looked at this process of creating, I realized that I did this with all of my creative expressions. So, like, I would do the same thing with song. So I had been working on this song called The Praying Stone for probably, I want to say, almost 10 years. I wrote it initially in a tribute to my grandfather and father. And it was this story that I was told about my grandfather, how he would pray in the woods in Oklahoma on this stone. And he would pray so much that it made a mark in the stone where his knees were. And it was his like spiritual and physical bedrock. And then I think of my father, how every single morning he was a welder. He was a blue collar, salt of the earth from Wichita, Kansas, working man. And every morning I would wake up, he would be up at 5:45 in the morning, and he would be on his knees. And so there was this practice of prayer. Now, my whole spiritual journey is different from my father's and my grandfather's, but it started with them. But I look to their practice as a very powerful example of how to conduct yourself and how to center yourself in your life. And so seeing that example, and then when my father passed away in 2010, seeing this example that was kind of left with me as I sat with the loss of my father, I started this song called Praying Stone. And I initially wrote it just with this idea of praying stone and 50 years on the praying stone, and thinking about my dad and his time as a welder and a minister and a father. And the 50 years sounded really good when you sang it, and it was actually accurate to the timeline of when he had his connection to spirituality. And so I took that and built this song. And as I built this song, I'll use the word build because they're putting it together, a foundation of thought stacked on top of the other, and it's just building. It became uh, alive. And I would sing it in different contexts, letting it breathe, right? Before different types of audiences. And what I found is that for a long time, I didn't know how to sing it correctly. And it wasn't until I think 2017 that I was down in Los Angeles and I was driving for Lyft and I picked up this lady and she one night and I was taking her from South Central over to Long Beach and she was telling me her life story. And she was telling me about how her mother was shot, her and lived through it, and her brother was shot and paralyzed from the neck down. And he survived, but he was, right on the verge of getting accepted into a major college with a full ride scholarship, and all that ended. And then I was taking her to go get treatment for cancer. And she had lived in South Central LA for her whole entire life. And she still found a way to say that she was blessed. And I marveled at that. And so I included that into this song called Praying Stone. And so it wasn't until like last year that I was singing in front of a group of college kids. And the first part of the song is like a testimonial, if you will, of a person who stands up in church and they testify. And this is the old black churches that I grew up in, where they stand up and they say, I woke up this morning and I didn't feel the pain. And it's a bit of a poem, if you will. And then the praying stone part is the other people in the congregation singing along with this person. Because a lot of times in the black church, something will start out as just talking, and then it goes to a full-on song, And so if I can share a bit of Praying Stone with you, I'll do it, and you can kind of catch this feel. So it starts out with, I woke up this morning and I didn't feel the pain. My body was whole again, and the demons were slain. 'Cause somebody was praying on the praying stone again. 50 years on the praying stone. My knees are old and my back is warm, but the battle is won on the praying stone. Praying stone, praying stone. Said 50 years on the praying stone. My knees are old and my back is warm, but the battle is won on the praying stone. Praying stone, praying stone. Said 50 years on the praying stone. My knees are old and my back is warm, but the battle is won on the praying stone. Praying stone, praying stone. Said 50 years on the praying stone. My knees are old and my back is warm. The battle is won on the praying stone. Praying stone, said praying stone. Said 50 years on the praying stone. My knees are old and my back is warm. The battle is won on the praying stone. Praying stone, praying stone. Said 50 years on the praying stone. My knees are old and my back is warm. They shot her mother. They shot her brother. But she found a way to say, I am blessed. I said 50 years on the praying stone. My knees are old and my back is warm, but the battle is won on the praying stone. Praying stone, praying stone. 50 years on the praying stone. My knees are old and my back is warm. Yeah. So that right there is the version here in the studio with just me and the engineer here. It's totally different when you sing that in front of a huge audience and they start clapping along. And that is the process of letting the paint dry, or letting the piece breathe and live as a living kind of thing where it feels different on today. It feels different in 2020 with a pandemic and with so much social unrest and so much unknown. These things feel different. A year ago it felt different. But that is a part of my work, is letting things have this kind of holistic approach or holistic existence where they don't have to be the same thing every time, because we're not the same every time. You know, things that worked for us last week don't work for us today. Things that worked for us 10 years ago is like a foreign concept to us now. And we're fluid human beings. And this practice of letting the paint dry, of letting things breathe, of letting things exist and backing away from things and putting art and putting poems and songs and our life and our bodies in different contexts, it really, to me, has become a way of existing. It's a lifestyle. It's a creative process and practice, and it makes me think of the current painting that is sitting on the top of my psyche and my spirit, which is Invisible. It's titled Invisible, and it is a painting of a young black man from his profile, from the perspective of his profile, and you can't really tell on his head if it's his hair or if it's an actual crow. But it's it's not a crow, it's actually a raven. But this piece is me looking at the perspective of my own view of blackness, my blackness, and black bodies. And it's this concept of recognizing that in so many cases, we didn't have the power to dictate our perspective of ourselves, the view of ourselves, and control that narrative. And so this piece is taking a very personal and intimate look at what it feels like to be black and how I view myself and the beauty and of being black. And the young man that I painted isn't me. It wasn't even done from a reference. It was done from like a mental reference, if you will, of looking at so many black people growing up and being black and what that means. And realizing that phrase has been put on us and labeled where that we all understand it. But there is something that we were before we were black. We were just people, just human beings, and we still are. We just have these labels. But that piece almost didn't happen. And I'm amazed at this creative process of how many paintings that become impactful that almost don't happen. I had painted it kind of at a day that I was really, really tired, and I wasn't even sure about it. And there were several things that weren't working with the painting, like technically. And I went to sleep. Actually, I worked on another painting afterwards, and this one wasn't quite finished, and I was going to bring it in to show it. And I woke up early. I couldn't even sleep that well because I was so just like unrested mentally around this painting not being done. So I woke up really early and went into the other part of the house, the studio area of my house, and I got a little bit of clarity on the edges of the form and how I needed to change that. So I changed that, and then I repainted the eye, and then it was acrylic. It was all acrylic, and then there was a section in the eye that below the eye that was still not looking right. So I went over it with an oil stick, and that oil stick is a really, really matte finish. It's kind of greasy, but it has a greasy, like a visual effect, but it also is less shiny than the acrylic paint. And so what that did was that softened the area under the eye and highlighted the eye better. And this is all the nerdy stuff that artists go through as they sit and look at paintings. So I was just lost in this painting, and I got the edges of the body right, and then I got the crow right, and then the piece was complete. But the night before, I was on the verge of not presenting it and not painting it. And it just goes to show you that we never really know how something is going to land, if it's going to work. We have to put it in a different context many times. We have to let it breathe. We have to take it out to the public and put it up for scrutiny. And it's okay. It's okay to have something critiqued. It's okay if something doesn't work. But I think it's good to recognize your feelings of doubt. For me, it is. It's so important to recognize my feelings of doubt around my creative process, but to sit with the work. So the song Praying Stone, like I mentioned before, I sat with that and performed it for many years, but it really didn't start to come together until 2020. 2020. It was 2020 the last time I performed it publicly. And when I think of that, I think of this piece, how it was so fragile, the piece Invisible. It was so fragile and it almost didn't happen. And that happens so much in my process, in my creative work. So what I find is that I don't trust anything that I don't like. So if I'm in the studio and I don't like something, I don't trust it. I just put it away and wait till later and let other people look at it, because I'm too close to the work. I have to tuck it away and then bring it out later and let it dry, let it breathe, give it, sometimes I give things 24 hours, sometimes I give things a couple of years. And I come back to those paintings and those writings and those pieces, and I re-examine them, and things, again, with time, they feel so different. They feel so different in the context of time passing. And then that brings me to some of the work that I've been doing around ancestral work and my ancestors. I had this one ancestor that I heard about years ago, and her name was Alyssa Mothershed. And she was born into slavery in, I believe, the Kentucky area of the United States. And she lived for 100 years as an enslaved woman. And then at 100 years old, slavery was ended and she was freed, so to speak. You know, I say that with quotes because you're coming from being enslaved for 100 years and then you're told that you're free now. What does that mean, right? So she was freed at 100 years old and lived to 105. So she lived 5 more years after that. And I started doing this work around Alyssa Mothershed and thinking about this idea of, first of all, what does it mean? What does it take to live for 100 years as an enslaved person? How do you even get through that? How do you get up every day for 100 years and exist as an enslaved person? And then what does it say to the level of strength that you have as a person? And then she had children. She had many children and then grandchildren. So my direct line was I believe a daughter that she had. And then that daughter had my great-grandfather, and then my grandfather, and then my father and me. And I've been really sitting with this idea of who is Alyssa Mothershed. And I am a direct descendant of that. And what does that mean? So I've been toying around with the idea of I started working on a play. I started working on some songs, titles like 100 Years, that comes up. And the name Mothershed was a name that she changed, that she made up and took on herself. Her original last name was Kelly. That was her slave owner's last name. And then they got rid of that name and created this name Mothershed. And then everybody became Mothershed. And then as the lineage went down, some picked Mothershed and then others picked Johnson. And so I'm Travis Johnson, but I come from that Mothershed lineage. And as I've been working through this idea of what does it mean to be descendants of enslaved people in 2020 in a pandemic, in a Black Lives Matter movement, what does it mean? What is, it has, and I'm trying to discover that. So I've been working on songs, I've been working on poems, I've been working on all of these things to understand this. And I started with a poem, and the poem is titled Mothershed. And I'll share it with you here. It's, this is Mothershed. She is family. She is me. She is 200 years ago. She woke up woke. She is grateful. She is beyond strong. She is the mother of thousands. She feels this truth in her bones more than she knows it. She has no master. The other children see it now. Her scars are a testimony of how powerful she is. It is no surprise that she outlived slavery. She is whole. She is peace. She is me. I am her. I am Mothershed. And so that was kind of like the start of me exploring this ancestral work and letting these ideas come through my art, my songs, the way I live, and just really looking at Mothershed and going, what would she think about my life now? What would she think about the current times right now? How would she feel about that? How would she feel about traditional religion? What would it mean to her? What songs would she enjoy? What songs would she enjoy singing? What songs would she enjoy listening to? And this is all in the context of understanding that she was a woman who was enslaved for 100 years. And there's this real sense that I got and a real just truth that I realized that many of these questions that I had and ponderings that I had, I will never know the answer. It's impossible for me to understand what this means, but I feel it deep in my spirit that it's powerful and enriching for me to think about her and to think about her in relationship to 2020 and where we are now. And if I can draw upon that strength, that resiliency of 100 years lived as an enslaved person and push through this pandemic with all of the uncertainties, with all of the unknowns, and continue to press on, I think that is a worthy and powerful way to think of things. And so I'm inspired. I'm inspired in the midst of so many questions and so much public pain being expressed. I'm inspired. And I had a conversation the other day, and the phrase came up, as you stand in the light of this historic moment, embrace the historical role that has been placed upon you. And I feel this very clearly, that as human beings, we all have a historical role right now. We're all awake. And our current state kind of feels like, to me, this is what it feels like. It feels like we're having surgery performed on us, but we're awake while it's happening. And we're just processing a lot of these extreme, painful things. And we're trying to address very, very serious questions. And we're trying to sit with our humanity. And there's probably a part, I know for me, that is disconnecting and thinking more objectively, because it may be too painful to sit with the reality of certain truths that we're faced with today. And I have this like desire and this instinct to lean more into our humanity and to go that way. I feel like that's the truth as human beings, as people that care for other people and that walk in love and that reject fear. And there's a lot to be fearful of, but to really, really become intimate with loving ourselves and loving people and over indexing on taking care of ourselves, over indexing on taking care of each other and being considerate and being decent. And it's extremely hard because there are so many things that even for me, I say even for me, that cause a visceral response and cause so much hurt. But I'm really, really sitting with this idea of standing in the light of this historical moment and maximizing my historical role, whatever that is. And sometimes, as I said in the beginning, it may look like a poem, it may be a song, it may be a speech, it may be an essay, it may be an action. Sometimes behind the scenes, there's things that you just have to do. There's times you have to show up for people, and I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to do that in this time. And as well as a singer that writes songs, I'm also a singer that I do a lot of improv. So I'd like to close with an improv piece just to close us out. And it may have words. It may not. We'll see what comes up. And we're just going to go with what we're feeling today in this moment. And I leave this with you, and I hope that you find your song, whatever that is. And I hope that you metaphorically let the paint dry. And if you're an artist, and you paint, let that paint dry. Yabode, 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 Yabode. I wake up, I wake up, I wake up, I wake up. I see your light looking at me. You are peace, you are truth. Hold on to the light that you have found. You are worthy. You are worthy of the blessings that are coming down. Yabaweda, 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 Yahweh, Yahweh, we are climbing to the mountain. We are climbing to the mountain. We are climbing. So, my friends, as you go into the world, you have gifts, you have talents, and we all have character flaws, and there is nothing wrong with that. What we realize is that the world will critique you for both. As you express your gifts and your talents, they'll say it's too much. They'll say you're showing off. They'll say you're not good enough. And they'll point out your character flaws. So you have to kind of ignore all of it and just be that light, be that joy in people's life. create your art, create your place of peace in your inner life. Protect all that. It's sacred. It matters. The most minute thing in your life matters, has a purpose, and can be the spark and can be the inspiration to drastically change other people's lives, to bless them, to take them exactly where they need in the exact time and season that they need it. So go in peace, my friend.